US and China, the petroleum war in the 21st century. We are going to go through a timeline, starting with the green gold era. The green gold era started when the United States proposed the dollar as an international exchange currency. Moreover, it was upset by the international community, since the currency was so valuable. Then, with $35, they gave you your gold bar. That is why all the central banks of the world began to prioritize dollars in their reserves, and thus the dollar earned the famed name as green gold. Continuing with the timeline, I'm going to talk about the 1960s and the 1970s. One of the aspects that I want to highlight from the 1960s is that the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, was established, and the US was the first country to show interest in collaborate with the organization. Moreover, in the late 60s, the increase of dollar demand and lack of gold backup in New York banks was an economic threat. Also, based on the book of H.W. Brandt's Greenback Planet, How the Dollar Conquered the World and Threatened Civilization as We Know It, says that Kennedy bequeathed the payments deficit and the dollar adapting it evoked to Lyndon Johnson, who tried to make it better but merely made it worse. Johnson stretched the federal budget to cover both the domestic programs that constitute his Great Society and the foreign war in Vietnam that constitute his great mistake. Federal spending grew by half from 1964 to 1968. Federal revenues by substantially less. The resulting budget deficit of $25 billion by 1968, combined with the continuing balance of payments travels to produce inflationary pressure that caused investors and foreign governments to gravely doubt the dollar's ability to carry the weight of the world on its shoulders, as the Bretton Woods system required. Furthermore, Charles de Gaulle didn't doubt the dollar so much as resent it. The French president had long brillied under the dollar's hegemony. Also, the French president put teeth into his words by demanding gold in exchange for France's dollars. The redemption strained the American treasury, as de Gaulle intended to do it. In public, Johnson still defended Bretton Woods, and he said that to go back to a system based on gold alone, to a system which brought us all to a disaster in the early 1930s, is not an answer the world would or should accept, and he promised he will not retreat from America's commitments. The United States will continue to meet its international monetary responsibilities. After Johnson's quote, in 1970s, the U.S. entered in an economic crisis, thanks to the imbalance of the economy. In 1980, the U.S. settled again the dollar as the international exchange currency and balanced their economy. Then, they made trade agreements with the OPEC, and they began to sell and buy petroleum in dollars. Continue with the timeline. In the beginning of the 2000s, China began to grow very fast and began to displace many powerful countries in many branches, especially in commerce and technology. By 2017, China became the first highest claimed country of petroleum, displacing the US to the second place. After that, in 2018, China began to buy the petroleum in yuans, and this put the OPEC in a difficult position with the US, which is the biggest contributor for the organization. That's why all that was said before led to an almost second Cold War, where it gave place to the economic sanctions between the two countries, China and the US. Early in the 2020, China is trying to position their currency as the international exchange currency, again trying to displace the US currency from the commerce sector. I want to end with my own quote. We are living in an era of change, in all the ways possible. Somehow, China has figured out and has proved that they can survive and surpass the expectative, while the US has been losing not only strength but credibility.